September is Life Insurance Awareness Month. November has been deemed Long-Term Care Awareness Month. So I didn't want too much time to go by in November without at least discussing it. In the past, when I've talked about it, I've shared some of my personal experiences with it, but this is more just purely educational and just some of the nuances and terminology and nomenclature that you might run across. And what I found in my career is that people that are familiar with long-term care are familiar because they've had a family member or they themselves have experienced the runaround, the cost, the burden that caring for a loved one can instill. So let's talk about the definition of long-term care. I got this from Wikipedia. You might think, but I'm studying right now. Every 2 years, it's required CE course credits, right? You have to stay continuing education. And as I was going through this, one of the things that I guess I knew intuitively, but I didn't really put two and two together. And that is the single largest paying source for long-term care is Medicaid. That's the individual states. And what it said was that most people confuse long-term care needs to be covered by Medicare, and that it is not. So long-term care is a variety of services which help meet both the medical and non-medical needs of people with chronic illness or disability who cannot care for themselves for long periods. Long-term care is focused on individualized or coordinated services that promote independence, maximize patients' quality of life, and meet patients' needs over time. Source Wikipedia. So measuring long-term care needs, first we have to understand when might somebody need care. And in the realm of, nursing homes or, insurance companies, there's what they call or have deemed these thresholds, right? When I first started looking at long-term care, and it's been over 20 years now, the only thing that really was sourcing it was ADLs, right? Activities of daily living, which we're going to look here in a second. But in the last few years, they've introduced, they're not qualifiers, but it could make life difficult if you can't perform some of these functions, which are instrumental activities of daily living, right? So they're just tasks which are necessary for independent living. But both serve as a measure of functional capacity. When a person's functional capacity is diminished because of physical or mental impairment, care may be necessary. So ADLs, right? When you can't eat by yourself, you can't feed yourself, when you can't bathe, dressing, toileting, maintaining continence, or transferring. Now, some of this may seem obvious, but and again, I've shared this before that one of my clients, both of them have since passed, but over the years, Art was a big boy. He was 320 pounds. And although a nurse, maybe weighed 115 pounds. And I said to him early on, I said, how many times should you get sick? Do you think Ann is going to be able to pick you up in and out of bed? And so that's the concern, right? And it doesn't matter how big and strong you are. As we get older, right, our strength wanes, our ability wanes. And this isn't even talking about cognitive stuff. So the IADLs, right, they reflect how much an individual interacts with his or her environment. So being able to use the telephone, driving, shopping, preparing meals, doing light housework, taking medications, managing money. And I'll go so far as to, I'm not going to share any specifics, but somebody close and dear to me had shared that, somebody in their family had the inability to communicate. They cannot speak and they can't write. And can, for all intents and purposes, can barely get around. We've all heard it, and I'm not afraid to say it. Getting old sucks. But if we're going to do that with a little bit of preparation, we can make our latter years on this planet a little bit easier. So here's something I do know. In all my years of doing this, and you know, as I was taking the CE courses, they confirmed it. The majority of people would prefer to be taken care of in their home. Nobody wants to go to a nursing home. I mean, I'm certain there's a lot of good ones out there, but I always seem to hear about the bad ones. And I know the stigma that's associated with them is that nursing homes are where you go to die, right? Nobody wants to be put there because it is depressing. And typically the level of care, especially on a state level or state-run, unit, could be questionable. So most long-term care recipients receive their care at home. The goal of the home-based LTC is to help individuals maintain their independence in a familiar surrounding. Home-based service maximize available resources, the home setting, available family members, volunteer paid services, and financial resources. So it allows for an integration of care in an environment that probably makes the most sense. Those receiving care generally prefer to remain in their home for as long as possible. ADL needs can be met informally with the help of family members and friends, as well as formally through volunteers and homemaker services. My mom used to, I never really quite understood it at the time, but, you know, in the last, 10, 15 years, I understood Meals on Wheels, right? She would volunteer for that. And, there are people that need help that either can't get out or count on some of those services. So, I just, I suffer from DI, delayed intelligence. So sometimes seemingly you're like, why would you do that? I was younger. I didn't know. And now I understand. So home-based services typically encompass the following: non-medical personal care services, such as the help with ADLs, right? The eating, the transferring, the toileting. Homemaker services, which can include the help with the, such as companion services, meal planning, preparation, shopping, light chores, bill paying, transportation, other IADLs. And then home health care services, by health aides, registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, social workers, physical therapists, hospice organizations, typically under the care plan of a prescribing physician. So community-based care, right, and services, they take place outside the home. And there's these can be places, adult daycare programs, where somebody can take that little bus, to and from a location, so they're not just in their home. And basically it's glorified babysitting. Senior centers where they can, people can interact with people of their same age group and have some type of structured activities and meals, and some type of health screenings. And then caregiver support programs provide respite from the stress and demands of caregiving in the form of substitute caregivers, or caregiver support programs. All right, and then facility-based care. So, this is come into play when it's time to consider alternative living arrangements. Many LTC recipients need only assisted living types of arrangements. Perhaps they don't have the option of home-based healthcare or have exhausted their home-based care resources. Others have health issues serious enough to require the level of care offered by a skilled, that's a key word there, skilled nursing facility for the range of services to meet these needs. The following facilities-based services are available. So congregate housing, are also called senior retirement communities, is merely a housing option for elderly residents who can take care of themselves. The community typically provides a variety of social and recreational activities. That was like the place where my client, when the husband passed, she went into Briarwood. Adult foster care programs are composed of families who volunteer to take into their homes an older person who needs some help with these ADLs or IADLs. They provide a room and service such as laundry and cooked meals. And then board and care homes, sometimes called residential care homes. So these aren't as common, but they are another option. And then, you have your assisted living facilities. You have your skilled nursing facilities. And then you have these things called continuing care retirement communities, CCRCs. So this starts to get into the scope of, where, similar to like the assisted living is similar to like an apartment setting. Somebody can go in, they can either rent or buy a unit. A skilled nursing facility represents a level of care that requires a daily involvement of a physician. This is, that level of care that we really don't want to have a family member go to, but sometimes life happens and it's beyond our ability to take care of our parents or uncles, aunts, grandparents to a level that they deserve. And then the CCRCs can be thought of as large campuses consisting of many types of facilities. These are not necessarily common in this area, but there are some locations where they are starting, in the sprawl to expand. So, I think that these communities, you can start off in one area. So maybe you're either buying a house or a unit, and then depending on as your age increases or your level or need of care might increase, you can transition through a series of different locations within the community to get the required care that's necessary. Sometimes you can buy in all at once, or sometimes you can pay as you go, and but they can be expensive. I left this in here. This is from my presentation that I did earlier this year, where I was talking about using and how do we pay for this. And I just wanted to point out that, in New Jersey, right, a nursing home, private room, 142 grand a year, semi-private, 135, assisted living, 80, and then a home health aid, 60. I mean, it's expensive, and that's in today's dollars. So if you're on this call and you say, hey, we all have parents and grandparents, but what are we doing, once we get through that chapter of our life? What are we doing for our care from a forward thinking standpoint? And starting to have some type of plan in place. I had mentioned sometimes if you're going to use your IRA, you can do so, but we have to understand the rules. Depending on how old you are, you could incur a 10% penalty. But it's still taxable if you start to roll the money out on a structured basis. Do you need all the IRA or 401k? So I deal a lot with federal employees, and they not only do they have a pension, and the TSP, or sometimes teachers will have a pension, and I'll see that they really have amassed a large sum inside of a 403b or a TSP, even a 401k, and they don't need it all. Well, if that's the case, maybe that's another way to start to get that money out, and we can help them to look at that on a tax efficient basis. The strategy can insure two people. So it might be a way to cover a husband and wife. Again, this is just an idea. It's not an end all be all, but it was something I talked about earlier this year. But long-term care claims and death claims are income tax free. So if you do need to turn around and use, some of your IRA, things like this, to pay for long-term care, there are ways that you can use the tax code to be efficient along the way. And then also consider an inflation rider. So folks, I know it's not the most exciting topic, but in the spirit of, long-term care awareness month, I wanted to touch on the subject more from an educational standpoint. If you have questions, if there's anything we can do, hopefully you've not had to experience this firsthand. But if you are starting to think about it, would like to see what your options are, the time to plan for some type of life event like this is why you're able to. So without any further ado, I want to thank each and every one of you for attending this call. If you have any questions, reach out and give me a call, and have a great night. Bye-bye.